Kia ora mai tātou katoa. So the next two panels are going to run back to back without any break. So I hope you're all have gone through your ablutions and are hydrated. We are amazingly running on time too, so I'm really happy about that. So on this panel, what we're doing is we've split it into two parts, and what we're really interested in looking at now is around curatorial practice. So earlier in the day, we spoke about art and Sandy's kind of process around kōwhaiwhai and making of his art. And then we had a discussion around the, which I liked how Ngātai put it, that kind of transmission of Māori from physical objects into the marae, into the whare, into artworks, and then out into the world. And now we wanted to look at curatorial practice, so we get a broad sense of the areas of influence that Sandy's had on a range of different people and their lives. And we're really honoured today to have some great guests with us to be sharing some of their whakaaro and their experiences. So on the first half of our panel, Sandy is here joining us with David Butts, and we'll be talking about a project from 1986 at the what is now called MTG, Museum Theatre Gallery in Napier. And then the second part of this panel, Nigel will replace me, and we have the wonderful Megan Tamati Quinnell and Tim Walker here, and they'll be talking about some of the projects and I guess that kind of contemporary art projects that transition from the museum exhibition or the museum kind of framework into the contemporary art gallery framework. So thank you all our guests for being here. It's for me personally, it's an honour to share the edge of the stage with you. We haven't used these seats at all today. It's nice backdrop. Nō reira, nei rā te mihi ka kōrua. David, thank you for being here, and also for being my museum studies tutor and teaching me everything I know about taonga in terms of curatorial practice and the history, that history around it. So kia ora, thank you for being here, David. And so the way I wanted to start this conversation, and I'll give you the microphone, Sandy, because this first question is for you. Actually, David, would it be okay to hit that first slide? Ngā Tuke Mata. It was the first iwi-led exhibition in Aotearoa, and it came through in terms of curatorial practice on the heels of Te Māori. And we had a Māori consortium of curators and experts who worked on Te Māori and used the whare framework for curatorial practice to frame the taonga and the layout of the objects in the exhibition within a Māori kind of cosmological narrative and framework and relationship. And David Butts was curator at the time at the museum and was given the task of taking that mantle and creating a kahungunu exhibition. And it was Reverend Canon Wite Tauhuata, who was the rangatira at that time, the kaumātua at that time, who gave David the mandate from the iwi to approach Sandy for the exhibition. And so my first question is to you, Sandy, was what was going through your mind on the day that David came out to Raupunga and knocked on your door?
I know what's going through my mind now. Is that I'm obviously being suckered in, because it's the same with you. You know, you respond in a way, and with David, I said, because he came and he said that, you know, we had sent him, and I thought, you know, if they'd rung me up or anything like that, I would have said no. But when someone is sent to you, and it's we te tau huata, you have no choice. You had no choice. So I agreed, and then a bit like how Ruben's been manipulating me through this whole exercise, so did David try to do the same thing. The difference is Ruben's Māori and he's not. So, it was like saying, okay, here we go, because it's not only the, David, it's the institution or the museum. But it worked out to be a very rewarding, a huge learning curve for me, and especially when you're given the trust that I hoped I had, and it's worked out. There wasn't too many people that objected to any of the offerings. But I'm going to jump to the end of this project. So we ended up with this exhibition, and then at some point, and I don't know how long after it, David said, "Oh, we've been invited to Southampton to what was it called?
The World Archaeology Conference.
Yeah,
World Archaeology Conference.
yeah, over in Southampton." I said, "Oh, yeah," and he said, "Yeah, and because you're a member of a third world culture, all your expenses are paid for," and he had to find his own funding. And yet it was him that actually had this project and got it going to the point that we won an award with that, and went to Parliament and picked up this award, and I wasn't worried about that so much as the fact that we were going to go to Southampton. So it's that, it's like realising that you begin a project and then however you invest in it, and especially we've been talking earlier about, how we relate as a culture. And that one there I had to really respond as Pāhuera, because Canon Huata was also Pāhuera. And it was, and David's written, he can talk about that, this paper on that exhibition, and some of the things that he has written that I wasn't aware of, but he was explaining the process. And I thought, I didn't know, for instance, the objection of the museum when I asked them to paint the whole place blue and put blue carpet in, was it, to eliminate, I think we talked about that earlier, the design style of the building itself. So, reading that, I thought that we've still continued to use our own whare as the construct, or whatever it was that we engaged in, that needed to identify and present ourselves as a people for our people. So that whole thing was about Kahungunu, presenting to Kahungunu, not as something that was part of the requirement of that place as a museum.
David, with that tono from we and being instructed to go out to Raupunga to meet a man that you'd never met before and knock on his door, that at that time was, for museums anyway, it was an innovative, a more inclusive way of working. But I wonder, coming from an institution whether you had some trepidations around that, how you felt about being sent out there, and kind of the human element of approaching Sandy, and what that was like.
He was nervous as hell.
I should have known that I was in trouble, because we loved to travel. We Huata loved to travel. And on this particular occasion, he just let me go by myself. And it's quite right. Sandy made it quite clear to me that had I not come with the request from we, he would not have done it. But yeah, there was some trepidation, but on the other hand, I had had the good fortune to work with Maina Mackenzie for 3 years at Manawatu Museum, and she had made some progress in converting me from an archaeology student into a person who'd started to think about museums, and she had, she had kind of continued my training, so that I had that when I moved there, and I knew people like Piri Shasha from Palmerston North, and just started to make contact with a few people, and they were just incredibly generous. We Huata, John Tangiora, Pauline Tangiora, Lena Manuel, there's a whole group of people, incredibly generous. And so, in a sense, I guess I knew when I went to Rauponga that being able to say I was coming on behalf of We Huata, carried a bit of weight, and it worked. You mentioned, you said to me, did I think we were involved in a new and innovative project? And I guess when you look at it, the short answer to that is yes, but you have to see it in the context of what had been happening in the previous decade. There were so many things that had been happening, and I'm not just talking about in the museum world, but just in terms of what I don't know, I think people generally refer to as the Maori Renaissance, or the changes that were happening in terms of legislation, education, and so on. There were huge changes, and we were kind of caught up in that. And I think the kaumātua who were involved in Tokemata saw that project as part of that bigger movement, and of course Te Māori what was happening. But Te Māori again was just part of that flow, and so there was some momentum, and so but it was quite different in the sense that once the kaumātua got hold of the project, and they did quite quickly, and they had such a presence, that it was easy to kind of keep the director at arm's length from it. And see, that's why Sandy said he didn't know that there'd been a question about whether to paint the gallery blue and have blue carpet, because Sandy said to me, I want to paint the roof blue and we'll have blue carpet. And then I had to go to the director and say, we want to paint the roof blue and have blue carpet. And, he was beside himself. He was utterly beside himself. But he was used to being beside himself because we had inside the museum a number of staff, one of whom some of you might know, Anna Bibby. She used to run a gallery in Auckland, but she was the collection manager. And she used to drive Robert mad. And I would kind of play the kind of in-between. So I was used to that. I was used to that process. And so, everybody accepted that the kaumātua were running the project, and the project had a number of strands to it. But once they gave the mandate to Sandy, he was away, and he just, you just went through a kind of set of phases, eh? You said, you know, how you wanted to kind of get control of the space, and then move the door, and you know, I don't know. Some of you will remember Hawke's Bay Art Gallery and Museum. It had a kind of a view shaft through the middle of the institution, so you could see from the reception area right through to the end of the museum to the faraway gallery, and this was considered a huge advantage that when people came in, they'd be able to see all of the through all the galleries, and they'd see what they were getting. Sandy's second request was to block that off. And I was really surprised when we managed to persuade to do that. So it was setting up the space, wasn't it? What were you trying to achieve in setting up the space?
That. What I needed was to go and firstly, like going into a marae, that back wall, that was the back wall, but it, you know, was so. Yeah, the construct of the place needed. I thought it's not going to work because we're not going to see anything until we're through which we created that waharoa for it. So yeah, use the construct.
When somebody was talking about your
microphone.
When someone was talking about your painting earlier in the day, they were talking about the framing.
Yeah.
You know, is this the way in which you've framed these Pautoko Manawa? Is there any kind of relationship between those two things? Because you framed those and you framed a number of other things in the exhibition in quite a...
No connection whatsoever. Because it's you know, it's a three-dimensional. It's a three-dimensional. So you have to go into the space and then be controlled. As you would go onto a painting, you would be brought to a beginning point on any painting. You'll know whether it's reading from left to right, whatever it is, and then once you're in that space, then it tracks right or left depending on the signals that you use to make people then view the art piece in a way that you were introducing the different story elements for each one. So with that one, you had to be in the space firstly, and then you swung. So from then you went left, and then you create your end wall, turn right to do the do the same. So it was, and as you can see, hopefully there, the blue then just became a background colour, and all the offerings then sat there in their own right. Even though you can see the door and the window, it didn't really work. I tried to create that, but the shape of it, it would have been. Now we would have hung it, those pieces there, and not so. But the Pautoko Manawa in the middle, the whāraki that they were a bit concerned about putting it down low. I said our ones, we walk on, sleep on these things, and so we needed to have it not under glass, which they wanted to do. I said, immediately, as we're talking about, how do you feel about the space? It needs to relate to us as a place where this is how you would see those offerings within a whare, not as a museum, where you're just doing a study. So each piece becomes just that, a study of the form itself. Is that what we did?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, you did it. Each one of the things I find really interesting. I mean, I just find it amazing to be sitting here, so many years later, still talking about this exhibition. So
that's your fault because you wrote that book and he decided it's something we should discuss.
But one of the things that has really struck me in looking at it again is how each element kind of there's something special about each element. So the way you treated the whāriki, that's special in itself, and it has a special function within the house. No, I won't go on about it, but so each element is like that, and then so the elements make up the house, and then that house is connected to the Poutokomanu on the big circle, and so it all kind of adds up to something bigger.
Yes.
Was that? I'm really afraid to ask you if that was,
Yeah.
I've been to talk to Sandy about once every 10 years. You can understand why, because you have to kind of build up to it. But
Yeah.
but it's like the three houses. I talk about them as the three houses. The three houses actually make up one house. And it's like the different parts of Kahungunu talking to each other. And there's one slide. There's this slide here which shows the Kahungunu Ki Here Taunga house with these carvings on the left from Te Poho Kahungunu Porangahau. The koruru speaking to the tahuhu from Mahia. Yeah. So, but what you're saying is that kind of happened intuitively.
No, it happened because that's now how it needed to happen for our own people to go in there, and it's correct. See, for you're asking the question, why is it doing this? Māori wouldn't go and ask the question. They would see it immediately as how we would have it in a whare. So, it's a different, I love keeping, him in his little sector because each time it reinforces we've still got a long way to go. But, but it is, you just, like I said with the whāriki, you needed to be able to sit on. Home people would want to sit down there, because there's no chairs around the place anyway. Yeah. So it's sort of, it is I think we know what we want for our own people where they walk in, like I said to Ngātai, how do you feel, how do you want us to feel when we go into your whare? I wanted these ones to, our ones, to go into this piece and not look at dead things. I wanted them to be placed as they would have existed in their own right. So it is an approach that, we know that works for us. And if we can persuade, the institution to allow us to do that, I can say, the best thing for anybody to see with our work is to see it as we see it, not as you wish to have it presented in a format that it just becomes a point of study. Yeah.
But you were happy to kind of bend the rules in a way, weren't you? If you go back,
I had no choice.
Yeah, you see, if you go back,
there checking us out.
if you go back to this one, and you
Yeah.
can see the popo on the back wall
Yeah.
rather than the side wall.
Yes.
The whāriki probably in the house would have been oriented along the wall, those kind of things. But as a composition, as an installation, you can take those kind of.
This is where Māori you have a means of making people accept. I just say, but that's a Pāwera way of doing things, So you can do that, and you do, because really it had to go that way because the heke would not have fitted in a balanced way across the wall. It would have created an imbalance. You wouldn't have had the back wall and the front wall, as a focal point. It had to balance. So that's no different from, designing tukutuku or how you lay out our art forms that creates the balance. If I did it any other way, it would have thrown that space out of balance.
I have a question for you, Sandy. Sorry, David.
He's taking over.
Yes.
Just joining in. No, because you talk about the compositions within your artworks, and then you've got these compositions within the space. And David wrote about this, so I'm stealing David's ideas.
Yeah.
Can you come up to one of those other images, David, where you can see even the first image actually, the first image we started with the big. Sorry, no, the second one.
Can I just?
You can see these compositions.
Can I just say that
Microphone.
it's hard now to get a sense of how wonderful this exhibition was, but that's why I put this first picture in of the Potoko Manawa and peruhukas in there as well. To get, this is the way these Potoko Manawa had been displayed at the museum for 20 years. And then the next week you come in and you're faced with that. It was just amazing. Where do you want to go?
No, that's exactly it. Because you see the composition, like even in the placement of there is the central one's higher. It creates a peak. So you've got a triangle within a circle, and then you've got these two columns on either side, and you actually can see your painting practice playing out in the way that you lay it out. But I think, like you say, it's intuitive. It's a Maori way of thinking, and your art kind of comes through as well in your composition. Can you go to the cases as well? Can you see it again?
You see, to me, it was like placing the way you would place things in a painting.
Yeah. I wonder if you could talk about the placement. I'll give you my microphone now.
Okay, so, and it is, as I say, the whole installation is an artwork. Wherever you look, it's going to be that. So you work on what you know will allow that particular space to have its own balance. It can be there in its own right. So I thought by dividing these, the triangles as common, an important design image for us, and then placing the tongue in a way that what was giving me, a focus to the right-hand bottom, there's a center up the top. And, so, yeah, it is like, so I do it with all, any artwork I do, I'll look at how to read the space. And the other one was that the labels, I don't want the labels to interfere with, what you're trying to create as a feeling for the works itself. And the lighting was low, that used to upset people. But I said, I want like our black on black. We had a black carving, and we put on a black background, so that it would emerge from the space and not be just it's the surround of that carving as well as the carving itself. That one. Go on.
Well, I wonder if you want to say a wee bit about Toi Te Rito Maihi's painting.
Oh, right. Oh, well, she's a cousin, so I had to have her in there somewhere. But it was also, because it's a contemporary piece, very geometric, and it sat in the corner, it was comfortable there. It could work. Because it was a pattern, so it's like a tukutuku pattern. And it was referring to raranga and the weaving. So, yeah. And they wanted some contemporary. The only reason my one's in there is because the Wairarapa people, any Wairarapa people here, didn't complete the panel that they were meant to, that was sent back with them. There was another half of that, and so when it came to this, it was sent back, wasn't it? And then they filled it. They filled in my painting, which was part of the collection. So yeah. Anyway. The interesting thing, was that when they made a change to the exhibition, it was only meant to be 5 years, and it lasted 15 years there. And then I was visited. I was up at Toihokura at the time, and this group came from the museum in Napier, and they said, "We're changing the exhibition. We've come to consult with you." My response to what they had. Then they presented the whole plan, everything in its place, all the going. And I looked at it, I thought, why are you coming to consult with me about something that you've already actually decided on putting it back to what a museum would normally do, pieces for study, you know, and there was nothing I felt, so I just agreed. I got hoha really, because I thought, you're just ticking a box to say that you've gone through, you know, the consultancy, and yet you'd already decided what it was. So we went back to grey, didn't we? Yeah.
That's a great place to end.
Yeah, especially when it's right on time.
And we're right on time. Hey, thank you both, and thank you, David. I really appreciated your writing that you wrote. I thought it was great. And one of the reasons why it resonates with me so much is we have Whiti Te Rā, which is a exhibition that Ngāti Toa curated with Te Papa, and they've got Pounamu mere running down the centre of the exhibition, so there's a ridge bone, and there's all these analogies around Te Tatou Pounamu, the agreement that's made with the exchange of Pounamu, and the exhibition ends with the two mere that were given to the government when Ngāti Toa settled their settlement. So there's, it's exciting for me to see different ways that exhibitions can be realised, and also I see a relationship between whare, that an exhibition in a way can be a whare, or at least house Māori within an institution, and to make those things accessible to anyone who's kind of coming in to have that, not just the objects, but the experience of being within a Māori space. So thank you both for your contribution, and for sitting on the pie with me this afternoon, and I'll let you off the hook. Kia ora korua. Thank you.
Kia ora.